Hello and welcome to Tech Deals September 2019 PC Build Guide. $1,000 for the ultimate 1080p system build or a very nice 1440p build for gaming, light content creation, and pretty much anything else you might do with such a computer. This month we are featuring the Ryzen 5 3600 6-core 12-thread Zen 2 processor, and this is a beast. In terms of value for the money, for the next 3 years, this is all most people need. I love 8-core chips. I'm a fan of the 8-core Ryzen 7 chips, but truthfully, most people really can get away with a Ryzen 5 3600, and at $200 for the CPU, it's a great value. Now, in today's video, I'm going to take you around this system and talk about the parts and give you a brief idea of why I've included them, give you a couple of quick ideas on alternatives. Perhaps you want to customize the case or customize the motherboard for your own preference. We'll talk about a video card alternative in just a second. But if you're looking to spend $1,000 today, right now in September or maybe October of 2019, this is a really good starting point. Linked in the video description below will be links to all the products I'll be talking about today, the main items here, and a couple of alternatives to Amazon and Newegg. Those are affiliate links. They support the channel at no extra cost to you. If you like my content, please use those when shopping. It really does help. Now, coming back to the CPU for a minute, we'll talk about the others, but the CPU is, in my opinion, the most important part of any build. It's your central processing unit after all. I have been for some time now a big fan of 8-core 16-thread processors. If you want a 5-year chip, if you want something to last 5 years, I do think you need to step up to it. But if you want 3 years of awesome performance, then 6 cores really will be enough for most people. And at $200, the value equation here is tremendous. The X chip, the 3600X, is currently $40 more expensive. It does come with a better cooler. It really isn't worth it, however. There is a very minor performance difference between the two chips, and you certainly could overclock this one, and then they'll run basically at the same speed. So if value is your language, then the 3600 is where it's at. Next up, we have motherboard choices. You need a motherboard for your CPU to install in. Ideally, it would be the new B550 motherboards because you could get those in the $80 to $100 price range. Unfortunately, the B550s aren't out yet and won't be this year. January 2020 is the current estimated launch date of B550s. You can absolutely install a Ryzen 5 3600 in a B450 board with a BIOS update. If you already have a board, update its BIOS and you're good to go. The problem is if you buy a B450 now and you buy a Ryzen 5 3600, the BIOS may not support it out of the box. And if you don't have a previous generation chip, most B450 boards can't be updated without an older generation chip. This board is the exception. I'll link to it down below. The B450 Tomahawk is one of the few B450s that has BIOS flashback. You do not need a working chip on this board. You do need a working USB flash drive, a maximum of 16 gigabytes of size with a FAT32 partition, and another computer to download the BIOS from MSI's website, and then you can update the BIOS without a CPU. But most cheaper boards won't do that. In my opinion, the X570s are worth it. Not this one, the lower end one I'll talk about, but the X570s are worth it if you're building a new system. It makes no sense to me to spend $1,000 on a completely new system build and have to worry about BIOS issues on day one with your new CPU. Upgrades, I understand, but you can get for $150 to $170 several different X570 motherboards. Currently, $35 to $55 more than this B450 Tomahawk gets you an X570. The Gaming X, the Gaming Plus from MSI. You can get the X570-A for $149. That's also from MSI. And there's also boards in that price range as well from Asus and ASRock as well. And while yes, you could save yourself $35 or $50, save yourself a headache. Spend $150 to $170. Get yourself a 500 series board for your new Zen 2. After you've picked out your motherboard and your CPU, then you need a CPU cooler. Actually, most of you should not buy a cooler. The Wraith Stealth cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 3600 is not the best cooler ever, but it's much better than Intel stock coolers and it does the job. At stock speeds, which are only a few percentage points slower than an X chip, I think the stock cooler is just fine. On the other hand, if you want to overclock your chip to the max, if you want to get X speeds or faster, you probably will want an aftermarket cooler. You do not have to spend a fortune. A 120 millimeter liquid cooler, frankly from any manufacturer, this is just a good example at $50, 120 millimeters is all that you need for a 6-core 12-thread Zen 2 chip. Or something like a Hyper 212 Black or a Hyper 212 RGB, if you want RGB, is all the air cooler you need. Going to the big monster coolers will not improve your overclock in any respect. Temperatures are not an issue on Zen 2. Voltage and clock speed just run into a wall. You'll get 4.2 to 4.4 gigahertz at the most, no matter what cooling you put on it, whether it's one of these or one of the big monster coolers. Save your money, spend $30 to $50 if you want to overclock. Next up, we have system RAM. Thankfully, system RAM prices have come way down from just 6 months ago. 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz CL16 RAM is now $70, even for the good stuff such as RGB RAM. You can buy faster RAM. DDR4 3600 is not too much more expensive. It does not make a substantial difference. I did a video on RAM speed differences. For what most people do with a computer at this level, it makes no real world difference. 3200 is the deal in terms of value. 16 gigabytes is also the sweet spot at where it's at. You can go 32, but not at this level. If you're buying Ryzen 5, if you're building a $1,000 machine, it's 16 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes. Don't go less. It's not cheap enough to justify it, but don't go 32 quite yet either. That's for the high-end content creation rigs at this point. One quick thought on RAM compatibility is that when Ryzen first came out, it made a difference which brand you bought or which module, or was it AMD certified. With an X570 board and a Zen 2 CPU and 3200 megahertz of RAM, it really doesn't matter. They're all going to work. And that's one of the nice things about buying the modern platform that's updated and 3200 megahertz RAM being cheaper is you don't have to worry so much about, is which module is going to be compatible and which one is going to work. All of my 3200 megahertz kits work in all the updated systems. So I've got a very nice kit of Team Group RGB RAM here, which is very competitively priced, but there's others as well. So if you're worried about RAM compatibility, 3200 in an X570, you basically have none. That brings us to storage. I have a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD included in the $1,000 price point. And I think at this price point, 1 terabyte is the minimum I would go with for a boot drive. You may want extra storage. You can add hard drives and other extra storage if you want. But for a boot drive, go with a 1 terabyte. This is not the QLC 660p that I have talked about so much in previous videos. I recently did an 8-drive comparison, NVMe. Go check that out if you're interested in all the benchmarks and the detail behind it. But this is an Inland Professional TLC or tri-level cell drive. It is $110, $15 more than the 660p. And for a boot drive for Windows, spend the extra $15 and get the faster drive. You may notice that I have some other drives over here. The Samsung 970 EVO Plus is amazing. It is fast. It is responsive. It has the best software in the world. It is a great drive. It is twice the price, literally $230 versus $110 for the same storage. For a $1,000 build, not worth it, not even close. I also have a PCI Express Gen 4 drive. Very nice. Even more expensive. Don't bother. For this budget, for this price point, PCI Express 3, 1 terabyte for $110 is where it's at. CPUs, motherboard, RAM, SSDs, these are all nice, but this is a gaming computer, so let's talk about the gaming graphics card. 40% of the entire budget is going into the graphics card, which is about where it should be. That is not an unreasonable amount to spend if the primary purpose is to play games. We have two choices here. Both are $400 for the same price. It largely comes down to personal preference. There are differences, and I will do a head-to-head comparison of these in the very near future, very extensive with a lot of tests. But for now, let me just say that they are very similar in performance. One's from NVIDIA, one's from AMD. The Gigabyte WindForce Triple Fan RTX 2060 Super 8 gigabyte card versus the Gigabyte WindForce Triple Fan, notice a pattern there, AMD Radeon RX 5700 XT. Both have 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM. The 5700 XT is in benchmarks a little bit faster, but they're very similar in performance, and it may very well come down to whether you have a FreeSync or a G-Sync monitor, or whether you care about such things, or whether you simply play games that are optimized for AMD or NVIDIA, because after all, some just work better on one card or another. Both have the exact same cooler. Both will run very, very nicely with a Ryzen 5 3600. Both will fit in most mid-tower cases so long as you have enough room for the length. The height's not a problem. And at $400, you get the ability to play any game at 1080p, high to ultra, 60 to 100 frames per second, no exceptions in 2019. 1440p is doable on like 97% of all games, 60 to maybe even 100 frames per second at times. These are really powerful cards. If you want to have a card that's going to do 1080p high detail for the next 3 years, this is actually the minimum you can buy. You could absolutely get like an RX 580 or an RX 590 for half the price. But those cards are now several years old, and they will not play for the next 3 years 1080p high on the new and upcoming titles, whereas these will. And if you're buying a CPU that's going to play all new games for the next 3 years, you want a graphics card that will play all new games for the next 3 years, which is why we're going with one of these. Again, pick your favorite. All these components are lovely, but you need something to put them in. We have here something I have never covered on the channel before. This is from a company called AeroCool, and it is their Cylon white case with RGB, with memory controller and multiple ports in the front for only $50. Plus tempered glass. It's actually a huge value. It's a little bit smaller than some of the cases I've covered in the past, but it will take a full-size ATX board, and I will do a build in this at some point. It supports two 2.5-inch drives and two 3.5-inch drives. There is ventilation on the top, which to be blunt is really good because there's like no ventilation in the front. This is not an appropriate case for anything much higher than this. 8 or 12 cores would not go well in here. This is a case for a 6-core 12-thread Ryzen 5 3600 to be blunt, but it is $50. And if you're spending $1,000 on a system, yes, you could go with a bigger, nicer case. Yes, you could go with one of my favorites, which is the Cooler Master H500, but that's a $100 case. And to stay at the $1,000 budget, you'd have to take $50 out of something. Everything's a compromise when you're at this price point. And so going with a $50 case does enable you to put some more money in some other components. That's a personal preference, and of course, you may have your own favorite brand. Maybe you like Fractal Design or NZXT or Corsair or one of the others. Most companies offer something in the $50 price range. So if that's your price range, pick your favorite. Last but certainly not least is power supply. You do not have to spend a fortune on a power supply for a system like this. $50 is really all that you need to spend, plus or minus 10, depending upon whether you want modular, non-modular, sleeved cables, etc. I have up here a selection of power supplies. I have used all of these power supplies in the past. They're all fine. 80 plus bronze, 450 to 550 watts is completely plenty. Your system here might draw 250 watts total while gaming between the CPU and the graphics card. So don't go thinking you need some 700 watt power supply or 80 plus gold. It's nice for efficiency, but if you have a $1,000 budget, don't put your money there. 50 bucks would be about my limit on a power supply on a build of this size. Custom PCs are custom. I do not expect you all to build exactly this system. Instead, it's a build guide designed to give you a starting point. Want more RAM? Want more storage? Want a different graphics card? Want a different case? By all means, customize it and make it your own. But for $1,000, this is a really nice, well-rounded build with components that all will work very well together and balance each other out. There's no bottlenecks in this system. The CPU and the graphics card, these are very nicely balanced. These are going to run games very well for the next 3 years without any issues whatsoever. 16 gigs of RAM will be enough probably for the next 3 years in almost everything, so long as you're not trying to live stream or do content creation. You might want 32 gigs if you're doing that. And of course, storage is very personal. How many games do you have? How much storage do you need? Most of the decent $50 cases, the Spec 04 from Corsair, some of the others from Cooler Master, they have room usually for 2 3.5-inch hard drives. So if you want to add a hard drive, maybe a 4 terabyte drive for 50 or 60 bucks, then you can certainly put that down there. And then there's room to add more 2.5-inch SATA SSDs if you want to as well. Very nice performance for $1,000. Compared to what you were doing maybe 10, 20 years ago, this thing's a deal. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions. What are you building? What components did you pick? Do you have a favorite brand or a favorite preference or a CPU or graphics card that you're using? Put that in the comment section down below. I don't reply to every comment, but I promise you I do read them all. As I mentioned before, links to everything, what I have here, as well as a couple of alternatives will be linked to Amazon and Newegg in the video description below. Affiliate links, those support the channel at no extra cost to you. You can also follow me on social media. I've got Twitter down there, and we also have the Tech Deals Discord. Come on over and join us. And we have several channels you can chat on there as well. Thank you all so very much for watching. I will see all of you next time.